Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Podcast, YC edition. We have Sahil Sinha with us. He's co-founder at Lytic.ai. Also was co-founder at Spare Change, previously worked at companies like Intuit and Square. Cool guy on altogether, I believe from Mumbai, India, now in New York, or SF might be, who knows. Today we're going to talk about his company. We're going to talk about YC, the startup world, and everything he's accomplished in AI, in product and analytics, and mobile app development. This podcast is brought to you by podpar.com if you want to start or scale your podcast. It is also brought to you by Qual Your Mind if you want to optimize your mind. Go to neurohacker.com/CEO wisdom. Sahil, welcome to the pod. Tell us a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Hey, Charles. Yeah, big thanks, man. So right now working on Lytic. Lytic is monitoring and product analytics, sort of for the end-to-end orchestration of LLM apps. We started working on Lytic right at the end of our YC batch. Like you mentioned, we'd worked on a previous idea at the beginning of it. So yeah, that's me. I grew up in Mumbai. Growing up, moved a lot between Mumbai and London. But then came to America in 2016 for college. Worked in tech for a few years and left basically at the start of this year to jump into startup. And that's where I am now.
And why the decision to jump into startup? Why leave a 200K a year job at Intuit to throw yourself into the startup waters of hell?
Yeah, no, great question. I think that I sort of always wanted to do startup or at least try it. I think that was like a big sort of motivation getting into tech in the first place. I was born in 1998, so I grew up in sort of the heyday of consumer social and consumer marketplaces. Then in college, I was around for sort of all the economic activity that that sort of B2B SaaS era brought in. So I was always really excited about the potential for startups, both to impact like the lives of everyday people, but also just what they can do as incredible sort of economic activity forces. So I always wanted to give it a try. Wanted to spend some time in big tech to kind of learn the ropes a little bit. As somebody who was not super technical, I didn't do computer science in college. I wanted to learn like the craft of product and how to build something that people really love. And that's what I saw at Intuit. But once I had sort of done a few years of that and felt that I had that experience, I thought, this feels like a good time to at least try startup, at least working at one or doing it myself. I kind of felt like, while I was still young, I could try it, learn a ton. And then if it doesn't work out, I could always kind of go back into big tech if I really wanted to. But I think on the other side, I had just been really wanting to work really hard and have sort of full ownership over a product. So I think that was the impetus for startup in general. And then in terms of what we're working on specifically, I think, while we were doing YC, working on our previous idea, just the potential of AI and watching all these companies build with this new technology got us really excited about building something that could be sort of core infrastructure to this new wave of computation. My co-founder and I were big sort of tech nerds. So just the idea of building a product that's similar to sort of like the Mixpanels, post-hogs, amplitude of sort of Web 2, those equivalents for the AI world was really, really exciting. So I think all in, always was interested in startups. And then a couple things about the timing of now made it sort of particularly exciting.
Right. And why apply to YC and why did they accept you? What potential did they see in you and your co-founder?
Yeah, I would love to answer that question as well. In terms of why we applied to YC, so we had been working on another idea actually as a side project. That idea was Spare Change, and that was sort of like an Acorns for nonprofit approach. So if you've ever been to McDonald's or CVS, swipe your card, and then it asks you to donate round up the transaction and donate the rest to a nonprofit. It was that, but for the consumer end. And I think that we really liked just building it. We were building it for ourselves. We thought that it should exist. And so that's why we started working on it. We applied to YC because the deadline was the day that we discovered, this is when the application's closing. So we thought, why not? The application is really short. I had known about YC for a really long time. I'd followed the content. So obviously had aspired to doing it at one point. So I thought, why not? At least let's get the process started. I know that a lot of founders apply multiple times before they get in. So I thought, let's get the first first of maybe one or two or three in already. And then in terms of, what I think they might have seen, one thing I think helped us a lot was that we immediately started building. We didn't spend a lot of time with surveys or, setting up a landing page and then just going to speak at conferences. We were really interested in what does this product need to look like and what's the value we're going to give to users. And then just immediately trying to get that on the App Store and get feedback. And I think generally that seems to be what YC really looks for is not necessarily a set level of traction or a set level of success, but how much can you get done in a short amount of time? And I think that's ultimately what helped us get over the edge. My co-founder also was a software engineer at also a YC company. So I think that kind of helps as well.
Right. And some people might find that 3 months is short for a pivot. What data specifically did you see with spare change that made you think, okay, that's enough. We've had enough of consumer. We need to pivot to a new model now.
Yeah. So I think we had been working on specifically the growth problem for spare change for a while. So we had spent a little bit of time working on product, making that work. There was a lot of interesting sort of compliance and regulatory problems we had to think about. And then once it was at a stage where we could really push the product into the market, I think we realized a couple things. The first is that there's no real hair on fire problem in that space. When we were talking to consumers or potential users about the space, since we had sort of grounded the conversation in, okay, tell us about your sort of nonprofit or donation habits, we could think about problems within that scope. But I think once we actually tried to get them to use the platform, or if we didn't bring up sort of nonprofits or donations, all those problems just didn't really come up because they're not really hair on fire problems for consumers. On the flip side, we then found a few other partners that might have hair on fire problems in the space. Personal advisors was one. We had some interesting signal around taxes. And then nonprofits and charities themselves was another one. But again, their hair on fire problems is just we need customers, specifically young people. So if we were able to bring a bunch of users to these folks, they were more than happy to push our product. But they were really interested in pushing our product to help us get users. So I think that was the first. And then I think the second, in the absence of a hair on fire problem for the consumer or anybody who can push it to a consumer, we didn't really see a way to add sort of inherent virality or network effects. And that's really important for consumer, I think. We were able to sort of hustle and grind to get 1 or 2 users, but we weren't able to get to a point where those 1 or 2 users could bring in 3 or 4 users each. And I think that's really what you had to get to. So I think having sort of gotten those learnings and understanding, I think that's what is needed to win in this space. We were able to kind of put down that project and feel good that, we're potentially just not the founders there.
And who's your ICP now that you're helping people monitor their LLM applications from a single source?
Yeah. So we do best with AI companies that are sort of past the 0 to 1 stage. And now they're starting to think about how do they scale what they already have? How do they improve their offering for their existing users? Or how do you get a slightly wider funnel of the users you're already getting? So these are folks who have either hired 1 or 2 members beyond their founding team, potentially even a few non-technical folks like a customer success hire or a founding product manager. And really looking to understand what is going on with my LLM applications at a high level, finding that the middleware tools you're using to sort of monitor and manage an individual model would be needed for the management of that individual LLM inference. But you're starting to see all of the emergent challenges that come out when you have multiple models working together, and those multiple models are interacting with a front end and a back end. Those are really the problems that Lytic is really, really good at. And those are the customers that get the most value out of us right now.
How do you get your new customers, and what's your business model? How do you make money off that?
Yeah. So we get customers a few ways. One is a lot of outbound to just the AI community. We're really involved in the open source community. We go to a lot of meetups in the space. We were just at one in Toronto. We go to several in New York on a weekly, monthly basis. I'd say the second is content. We started investing in content a few months ago, and that's been huge. Just writing about the space, learning more about it, that gets a good amount of inbound, especially for folks who are wanting to take the leap into Gen AI, but don't quite have all their answers figured out. It's quite a risky technology for companies to just jump into. So playing that kind of expert role has been helpful there. And in terms of how we make money, right now we are just looking for design partners who are looking to go live. That's been our goal so far. But now that we have a few folks that are live, we make money with a SaaS offering that sort of sits on top of a lot of our open source tools. Our open source tools are free for folks to pull off of GitHub and use for their own projects. But the SaaS on top of that solves problems that really start to matter once your team of more than one person, sorry, and you're ready to start putting some money into this. And again, you care about those kind of emerging problems that arise when you have multiple models interacting with a front end and a back end.
Will you raise some money this year?
Yeah, so we have the initial capital from YC. We deferred our Winter 24 demo day because that's literally right when we pivoted, basically the day of. So we'll be raising the rest of our round with the summer 24 batch. So that'll be sort of end of August, most of September.
Right. And what will be your top priorities this year? More building, more selling, and where do you see yourself in the ecosystem? Because there's a lot of competitors in that field, I feel, this year.
Yeah. So I think, goals for a while is just, selling and building. I think that from the customers we're working with already, we've seen so much value in, managing costs, improving prompts, keeping your workflows nice and tight and consistent. So I think we're ready to start selling that and sort of scaling that benefit to other folks in the market. I think also as the AI market itself starts to mature, more companies are going to start aging into that bracket of caring about more than just getting product market fit or early traction, and are going to start thinking about these sort of optimization problems and have the challenges that arise when you have these multiple models interacting together. So that's our priorities sort of for the rest of the year. And in terms of where we see ourselves in the market, yeah, you're totally right. This is definitely a noisy space right now. I think there's a lot of problems to solve, and that's an indication of that. One thing we've noticed already is that customers are not using us instead of some of the existing middleware and observability tools, but instead they're using us alongside some of those. And that's, again, because I think a lot of the middleware and observability right now exists kind of at the single model level. And that's really good because you can hyper optimize what model you're using, the prompt, and even the data for that individual call. But we are noticing that there are a new set of problems that emerge when you start to think about how do you chain together these models to produce things that are really bespoke to that business and product. That kind of like N of one almost as the company starts to become more unique in the problems they're solving. So Lytic is really good at sort of sitting above sort of the individual model level and having a more macro view of your whole system, and then giving you, the developer, the tools to understand what's happening, where do you need to spend your attention, and how do you fix those problems.
Well, Sahil, thank you for that one, a short one, but where can people find out more about you?
Definitely. Big thanks for the time. So my personal handle on LinkedIn, Sahil Sinha, SahilSinha. We're also at lytics.co, and we have a pretty active blog there if you want to keep in touch with what we're working on. We put stuff out basically every day, new features every week, and this is a brand new space. So we'd love for folks to follow along and watch us try and figure this out along with the rest of the industry.